How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this is a great topic. We're going to talk about signs your partner is going to the dark side. So what do we mean by that? Signs that your partner may be corrupted or in the process of being corrupted. So these are some signs that if you're their partner, coworker, whatever, that you should look to see if, hey, can I trust my partner? Because what's going on with their behaviors or certain things that we're going to discuss in a bit that I think will be very beneficial, because I'm going to be honest with you. When people are getting manipulated, it's a process. It's not so overt. So it's good to know the signs, because if you know the signs, then you'll act before the person is fully corrupted, and then it's too late. Because a lot of times people are afraid to act because they think it's just a feeling. And it's like, well, what if I'm wrong? And it's like, well, what if you're right and you don't do nothing? Now, guys, this show is sponsored by three entities, as we usually say. First, American Military University. If you guys are looking for a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. It's a great school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, also very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And then we also have Guardian RFID for inmate tracking and cell checks, the cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, if you get a chance, check out their YouTube channel. They got content up there as well that we put in. We also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. The book is available. It's a good book, teaches about manipulation. And the link to that is in the description. I also have my latest book, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration. If you're looking to take your career up a notch, this guy has tons of tips, not just for myself, but for many other people in the profession. And again, this is a book that will help you right from the beginning make the most out of your corrections profession. And by the way, guys, you may be seeing myself, Connie, William Young, Russ Hamilton, possibly Gary Cornelius up in Montana. We are working on finalizing the plans to do an event there on June 13th. They've given us the all day. So basically do some panel discussions, and maybe each one of us are going to break out and cross into our native genius, if you will. Discuss whatever areas of expertise that we're comfortable with. And then together as a panel, we provide that great perspective. Connie.
Hello.
Wait, what's with that? What are you in a good mood?
I don't know. It is what it is.
No, it works.
I got some music in my soul, I guess.
If you look beautiful, by the way, Connie.
Thank you. Yeah, so hi, everybody. Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the author of The Cage with Sir Cocoon. And I am a regular contributor here at Tier Talk. I am loving this journey. Gangi and I got tons of stuff happening. It's always goodness. And we're ready to have some fun with this discussion.
How's the business going, Connie? Civilian Correction Academy?
The business is going good. Right now we're doing sort of a year-end event. As people are ready to get signed up now, we are offering some price breaks, just because that's sort of my giving back to the industry. Here is a way to get everybody trained and respectful of some of the financial constraints that some states are feeling. I personally don't feel that people should not be able to get training because there's not money in the budget. Right? Because different states find money wherever they find it. Like someone was like, hey, we're just going to take the money from commissary to get these people trained. Right? So I feel like when you recognize the importance of the non-uniform staff being trained, it's no longer a convincing that they need training. It's more of a how do we make it happen? So like I've been blessed to really connect with people who already see the value in their getting specific training, and they're figuring out how to make it happen.
Now, Connie, for those that have paid full price and are looking for a partial refund, what's your email that they can reach?
You are such a pain in the tail, I swear to God.
Hey guys, so me and Connie had a great topic that we were going to discuss, even though this is still a good topic. I'm going to do a rain check on it, but I want you guys to know there is someone that requested it, and I know you do watch my show regularly. We are going to cover that topic. I just need a little bit to do that for personal reasons, but basically the topic is going to be when you're forced into a position that you may not want. And this is for a sergeant who's been forced to move up because of these troubled times. And basically it's about how do they accept the position. I think it's a great topic. We actually dealt with something very similar to that in Nebraska. But I do want to revisit it. Me and Connie had some angles we want to put out there, but just give me a couple of weeks. So if you're watching it, and I know you are, I haven't forgotten about you. I know you think it's going to be the next show, but give me a few weeks, and then we will go ahead and revisit that topic. I think it's going to be a great topic. Me and Connie definitely want to explore it, so it's on our list. I just have to switch it for today. So today, again, discussion is dealing with recognizing signs of corruption in your partner. So me and Connie, as we were going through the signs, we always like to push ourselves. So if 2 or 3 come easier, we want to do 5. And we really want to kind of see, because usually the good ones are the 4th and the 5th one. You really got to be insightful. What we did realize before we start this dialogue is that the base of all this, because as we were going through the points, we figured, you know what, all this could easily be applied to the change in someone's behavior, what's foundational. So as we break into this, just know that a lot of this will fall into someone's change in their behavior. So again, you know, if you get anything from this dialogue, I would definitely look at change in the person's behavior. Now, this is what we'll break into a little bit more. So, Connie, the first thing we talked about, and I'll have you go first, and we could talk from the medical experience, custody, whatever. So we want to bring some stories to this to show you that there is application into what we're trying to provide. So the first thing we talked about, I thought was maybe obvious, but, you know, let's just go over it, is the separation from coworkers, Connie. So have you seen that? Now, mind you, real quick, guys, this is a good discussion where something could have, let's say, happened at your facility. Someone has been corrupted, and then you go back and look at it for the signs that you may have missed. So again, separation from coworkers, Connie, what's your thoughts on that?
So in those instances, typically what you'll find is that the individual is leaning more towards the inmate population, right? Like they can relate more to the inmate, or they are relating more to the inmates as opposed to relating to their coworkers. And sometimes because their behavior is a little shifty, or they know their coworkers know them well enough to know like something's up, they actually just put some distance between them and the coworkers, hoping that no one's going to be able to pick up on those slight and sometimes very subtle changes in their behavior. But the reality is that when you start seeing someone kind of pull away from their coworkers, you're more interested in, like, is everything okay with the person, right? Because a lot of times we don't automatically jump to corruption, right? Because we do, you know, expect the best from our colleagues, right?
Like
and
that.
So corruption usually isn't the first thought. It's like, I wonder if something's going on with them, you know, that's making them act that way. Sometimes coworkers may even take it personal, like, oh, maybe did I do something? Did I say something that they're kind of pulling away from me? And it may not even be that. It could just be that maybe there's something on their person and they don't want you close to them, right? It could be any number of things, which we're going to go through all of those numbers of things. But, you know, I think the separation from coworkers sometimes just, I don't want to slip and say something to a coworker. So I'm better off not even talking to the coworkers, right? I don't want them to pick up something from me, from my mannerisms, my behavior, or whatever. And so I'm going to stay away from them so they don't notice anything. But the reality is that most of your colleagues are going to notice that you are kind of withdrawn and isolating yourself.
Yeah, now I like what Connie mentioned too, by the way, because, you know, we're talking about the signs individually, but usually it's more than one sign collectively. But having said that, it's still worth noting, you know, oh, let me just dig into that a little bit, you know, a little bit further to see if there's any other signs. So I don't want to just say if you see this one thing, that's automatically what it is, because there are some people that are introverts and, you know, they don't want to be bothered. They come to work, do their job, and don't want to interact. Now, I will say here,
but you did say change, right?
Yeah, right. Change their behavior, right?
So typically,
Good
an
point.
introvert is an
Good
introvert no matter what.
Good point.
And so now, if this person like all of a sudden becomes an introvert, I think that's where the distinction is.
Yeah, you're right. You know what it was I was leaning on the fact that you said something that was great, where it was you don't want to take these signs by themselves.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of, yeah, but you're right. You know, right. These are changes. So this is definitely something that's a red flag. But again, you know, a situation could occur where they just don't want to mess with staff, you know, whatever it is. So, I mean, again, there could be many other reasons outside of this. But having said that, it's definitely a flag. It's a flag. Now, I want to mention something, guys. So in my experiences, by the way, guys, when someone goes to separate themselves from staff, remember, this is ideal for an inmate looking to manipulate, because their objective is, I got to isolate staff because they don't want any conflict to whatever game they're playing. Consider it's like a cult, if you will. Cults will keep people together and isolate them from outside contact because they don't want a counter influence. So I have seen where, if there's an officer maybe turning to the dark side, the moment they go to start interacting with staff, sometimes you see inmates get in the middle of that. Sometimes inmates will talk to the officer while talk to the officer trying to interact with the staff member, while another person's talking to the officer or the staff member to keep people separated. I mean, it's a game, yes, but there's effort in this, So once the game gets started, it's not even just looking at this staff member voluntarily separating themselves, but is something happening in the situation where I feel like I'm being separated? Here I am, just trying to get to the staff member, but I got everybody here in the middle trying to stop me. And it also can come with just even being divisive. Like all of a sudden, a staff member you normally get along with, you'll have an inmate come up and maybe just say, hey, yo, your partner here, he's been talking shit about you, or he's been doing stuff like that. Because again, part of it is a divide and conquer. So if there's a chance where they can isolate that staff member, they'll do whatever they can, especially when the game is in motion and they don't want that counter influence. And here's the tough part about it all, guys. As much as we worry about that staff being isolated, you have to realize something. The isolation is both ways, because now if you start to see that this staff member becomes isolated from, let's say, their peers, so you start seeing them going more towards the inmate, like Connie mentioned, a lot of staff will say, this fool is going to set themselves up. And instead of them kind of doing what's correct and talking to that staff and helping correct that behavior, they ignore the staff. It's
but
like,
I think that's a great point that you say, though.
I appreciate that, Connie.
I think
that you don't usually say that much. So
cut it out. I think that the fact that you raise that the staff notices it and they intentionally leave it alone.
Intentionally, keyword.
Right? Like, because that's their choice. Like, look at this fool going to get themselves caught up. And like, sometimes I think we take for granted that they know they're getting themselves caught up, right? Like, because we talk about manipulation, we talk about it being a slow and subtle process. And not everyone who's being manipulated knows that they're in the web. And I think that's a thing that if you have the insight to be able to identify it, I think we also have a responsibility as our brother and sisters keepers to actually go and intervene.
Yeah, and like Connie said, I mean, that's the big thing, because sometimes the inmates want you to see that relationship. They want it on Front Street because they expect that most of the time what we do, instead of talking to that person, human behavior, is we're going to avoid that person. And that kind of crosses into the next part, actually, the attachment to the inmate. So here's the funny thing. I know people may see this differently, because attachment to the inmate, a lot of people think could be hidden. But I don't think it is as much, because the inmates want that to be seen, because that helps them separate staff from other staff. So sometimes, believe it or not, it may not be good for staff to want to be seen, like a staff that's being corrupted. They may not want to be seen. So they start doing certain things in secret. But, the inmate, in order to further the isolation, there are certain things that they may want staff to see. Now, I'm not talking about the obvious. I'm not talking about the handing off of contraband or nothing like that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a relationship developing. Believe it or not, some people may think that the inmates don't want that seen, but I think some of them do, because I've chatted with inmates who have literally said, believe it or not, sometimes you want this other staff to see that, because most staff, like Connie said and I said, will not do what's correct by going to that staff member and saying, what the hell are you doing? The inmates know that by showing that, most staff will not approach that staff member. Most staff will walk away. But again, that's with the inmate knowing, not just the staff they're trying to corrupt, but the environment itself. Because there are some officers, like, that may go up to that staff member and say, yo, what are you doing, man? Stop. But right. There are some that rather just vent and not do anything, and the inmate's going to kind of figure out the game based on, the environment. What are the peers most likely to do? Are the peers going to approach him or her, or are the peers going to avoid him? So sometimes the attachment to the inmate may not be so secretive. Sometimes it could be overt in an effort to further divide the staff. So again, like Connie said and I said, you know, if you see it and you see it's too close, and we'll go over some signs, Connie will go first, get involved. Who gives a shit if you're wrong? Because the bigger concern is if you're right and you say nothing. So Connie, what do we mean attachment to inmate? What are we looking at here?
So the one thing that I wanted to clarify is, especially as I'm thinking of the context of a service provider, I think there is an inappropriate attachment to the inmate, right? Because I think there are times when you are in the therapeutic process, when you're trying to build a rapport and you're trying to come up with what is the appropriate treatment modality and things of that nature. Sometimes in nature, because you are so intertwined in this treatment plans and reaching out for collateral supports and stuff like that, you become attached to the thing. It's not so much the inmate, it's the how do we fix it, right? You get attached to the project, to the how do we come up with the right treatment plan to get the outcomes that we're looking for. So that's just one caveat I just wanted to add into this attachment to the inmate, that sometimes in this therapeutic sort of world, there is an attachment that you might have to your patient. And I just want to make sure that even as service providers, that we're aware that when it goes beyond the advocating for care, it goes beyond advocating for treatment, that the attachment is inappropriate.
Yeah, and Connie, what you're saying real quick is you work for the agency who helps the inmate. You do not help the inmate directly. You work for the agency.
Right. And so it's like, yes, you want to come up with what is the right thing and how do we get the right treatment options and the right, medical or mental health outcomes. Absolutely. I get it. Sometimes we're just trying to figure it out. And some people get obsessive sometimes over it. Right. But, and it may come from a good place. But then I think where it crosses the line is when we start having conversations with the inmate and advising the inmate on what they should and shouldn't do in order to help circumvent the process, right? And so for me, that is an inappropriate attachment to an inmate, even in the context of healthcare, because you are crossing the line. So essentially, there are times I think where an inmate has been there a long time. Oh, we know Baker. Baker is cool, right? Like, oh yeah, I've worked with Baker for 5 years, right? And like the complacency sets in and we kind of drop our guard and we let Baker have extra whatever. Or that's an inappropriate thing that's happening with you and that Baker because Baker's been there a long time. And I think maybe that's something, I don't know if we ever talked about that. Like, are there instances where we should be moving inmates, right? Because they've been in a housing unit for too long or they've worked with certain staff for too long. That's a whole different conversation.
No, but it's relevant.
Yeah, but the attachment I think happens when maybe the inmate's in your ear, right? Like this happens to be a personable inmate because we get those. They're not troublemakers. They like that. That's a good dude. Or like I remember having a female inmate. She was one of the workers and like she was one of the nicest people you ever meet. But like it wasn't above her to ask you for some sideways stuff that you had no business giving. But there are people who say, oh, she's so nice, or she's been here so long, or she won't do nothing wrong, or she's gonna always do the right thing. And so this attachment and this I guess trust in the inmate, like I think when we get too close, that's where we can see that attachment can kind of take us in the wrong direction.
Well, two key words here, Connie, is frequency and proximity. Like if I'm in a class and it's my first day of school, usually the people that I'm closest to are the ones I'm going to develop a friendship with, because again, you're going to class every day. There's a frequency, and the proximity is they're right next to you. So usually the people you're the closest to and the amount of time you're spending with them could increase the chance that you guys will develop some relationship. So again, a quick thing here is, why am I seeing this person every day and why are they so close? Now, again, if for us to recognize that sign, it's like, hey, just in general, even if it's starting to form and it's like, yo, you guys are close to each other every day. We talked about the podium, like
and you let them
and you let them be close. So you got the podium, so you're supposed to stand opposite of each other as if it's a chess game. And by the way, believe it or not, chess game, the reason why I mention that is if you think about how people situate themselves in a chess game, you're across from each other, which kind of puts you as competitors or challengers. If you start to move this person over to the side, there's a partnership that develops, so like here we're playing chess, here we're working on a project together. What I mean? It's just the body language, but it's true. Just that little shift matters. So if I'm walking into a unit and I see two people like this, I'm good with that. That's fine. There's a podium, as long as they're not there too much, I get it. But once you start seeing the person shifting here and there's no reaction from the other person, the officer, the staff member, they got their hands in their pocket and they don't give a shit. And the inmate is literally,
in your personal space and you're
in your personal space, that's a concern. And again, some of the things, with attachment is, and again, this is for us to recognize the sign in others, is this person defending the inmate when they're obviously wrong? Does this person feel sorry for the inmate when they're obviously wrong?
Are they giving them a lot of attention?
Yeah. Or you know what's funny, guys? I know this may sound crazy too, because a lot of times people think the attachment to the inmate could be secretive. Not. And as I said before, there are signs. The person may even talk about the inmate more than other inmates. Literally, they may find that inmate. You may hear that inmate out of that officer's mouth or a staff member's mouth every other second. I've seen that happen where you had officers that were falling onto the dark side, and it's like when you go back, it's like, wow, he kept on talking about that fucking inmate. Never thought of it. However,
why didn't it register?
Yeah, why didn't it? And it's funny because the dialogue may be superficial, but when you go back and look at it with a little bit more context, it's like, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of times he brought that inmate into dialogue that really was, not needed. It just, why is this person coming out of your mouth? Every time we have an interaction. Mm-hmm. But again, the attachment to the inmate, I think, is something that I think it could be seen. I know some people think it's in the dark, but I think it could be seen. I think there are times where, again, and Connie mentioned something before real quick, before we started the show, and we'll kind of retouch it just now. We did it a little bit just a second ago, but, observing the body language of that person when they're dealing with the inmate is strong too, because that person's relaxed in front of that inmate. And then you look at them when they're with other inmates and it may be different. You never know. There's a change, but it's like, wow, you're pretty comfortable around that one inmate. What's going on? Why are you so comfortable behind that one inmate? Hands in the pocket and just allowing them this close to you. Right, kind of the change in the body language.
Yeah, you can see when people start getting shifty or when they are relaxed, right? Like, because we typically don't want an inmate in our personal space. I don't want to smell an inmate. Right. Like I don't want the inmate being able to brush against my hand or touch me or anything. So, for me to have a level of comfort for an inmate to stand right next to me and talk in my face, like that's really odd. I just don't see where that would be sort of a normal interaction with an inmate.
To do a snapshot of that, Connie, can you move your head closer to this side real quick? This side? A little closer. No, the other side. This side. No, the other one. You're going right.
This way?
Yeah, that's good. Stay there. Hold on. Wait. Why are we doing that with an inmate, right? Why are we that close to an inmate? Connie, you smell beautiful today.
You're such an idiot.
Yeah. But Connie, but you're right, though. But I will. We just mentioned that. Guys, you could see that. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not a change in routine, correct the, hey, yo, what do you do? My supervisors back in the day, if they saw at any point you were complacent with an inmate, oh man, they would, my supervisor would pinch me right freaking here and you would know not to do that again. Yo, we're in a tie-to movement. Inmates are coming out like crazy. Why are your hands in your pocket? Boom. And your shit would be bruised, but you would know never again to put your hands in the pocket during an inmate movement. But the funny thing is, guys, that is a correctable behavior. There's no reason why you would be nervous in approaching somebody and saying, yo, you're a little too close. You may not realize it, but from my perspective, I saw that you were a little lean back, maybe foot on the desk while you're chatting with them and just very comfortable. And again, that doesn't mean that when you confront the officer or the staff member, you think they're dirty. It's like, hey, yo, wake up. Right. I'm not saying you're dirty, but you're a little too comfortable in front of this inmate. So I don't see why we're not doing more of that. Right. Because that's not, it's just like, hey, wake up, get your hands out of your pocket.
Yeah, even if it is a warning, right? Like you're not in a position to defend yourself right now. And I think that's one of the things that it speaks nothing to you being corrupt. It's just, let me help you to like protect yourself, right? Because if my hands are in my pocket and this inmate's right here and he decides to swing on me, I can't even get my hands out my pocket to defend myself, right? So like sometimes it may even just be like, hey, let me help you stay a little safe right now. Not even just you're corrupt, but like something's up and I just want to bring it to your attention.
And think about this series of this. So check this out. You go ahead and confront that person like, hey, you know, your hands are in your pocket when you're dealing with this inmate. Yo, you get your hands out. You never know. Oh, don't worry. He won't do nothing. Ooh. So now you get to that defending part. No, you don't think that, Connie, you know.
Yeah, but like that in of itself is like.
Well, think about it. First, what they're doing is first they're going to justify the fact that, because they know they're wrong with their hands in their pocket, right? So their immediate thing is because they know they're wrong, they got to justify their behavior. Yeah. So the first thing they go to in their arsenal is, you're talking about inmate Smith? Inmate Smith, I know he's not going to do no. What's he in for 7 counts of murder? Come on. He's been a quiet guy since he's been here for 2 days. You know, he's been here for 2 days, been a quiet guy. You know what I mean? But you know, am I right? Absolutely. And I said 2 days. I said
that's what made me laugh. I'm like,
I went balls to the wall on that one. Yeah, I guess 7 murders, only been here 2 days, but we got him. You know what I mean? But Connie, it's funny because when someone goes to justify maybe some level of negative behavior, they may jump into something that is truthful, but they may not realize what they just said.
Right. That too.
Just in an effort to defend the wrong behavior. Like, oh shit. Well, by the way, he's not a problem. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, well, no, your hands should have been in your pocket. But hey, can I talk to you on something else now? You know what I mean? Round 2. We're going to round 2.
Round 2.
It's like, yeah, it's like,
let's see how you defend that one.
Yeah, like I could picture like what is it, Rocky 6? One more round. Okay, we got one more round. All right, so this one's a good one, Connie. I have a couple of things here. I don't know, maybe even specific with medical too, definitely, but change in routine. So now this is unique, Connie, because this means that I would like to think if we're working with a partner, we know what their routines are. You know, and guys, this isn't just routine of the job. Part of that could be yes, but it's also what connects the personal to the routine of the job, you know, so personal habits that may shift. I know for me, one of the first signs I saw was someone who didn't work overtime that would only want to work overtime in this unit. All of a sudden, you know, you never wanted to come in for overtime, but now you want to come in overtime and you specifically only want to work overtime for this unit. Very, very unique when you're someone that never wanted to work overtime before. That
unit is quiet.
Oh, that's going to be the excuse? Yeah. Except when they're together. You know. Hey, but Connie, how would you explain some change in routines?
So, I mean, we talked a little bit before about, you know, I had a nurse who was diverting meds, right? And so the routine was like that nurse wasn't in the pharmacy, right? Like, but if someone needed meds, you know, nurses could go in and, you know, if they had a prescription or they had whatever, they can go into the pharmacy. But specifically, we had nurses who did meds. And so this person just was moving shifty, you know, like there's no other way to kind of describe that, right? Like, you know, at one point, you know, she's where she's supposed to be, but then she's like going to like the window of the nursing of the pharmacy. And then she goes into the pharmacy and then she comes out of the pharmacy. And then like, of course, there's times where we have significant med lines and like nobody needs that, you know, then it's kind of volunteering to help do meds. And it's like, no, there's a reason why we have 2 here, 1 in the back, and we have the officer out the front. Like there's a whole purpose behind the setup. And, you know, she just was moving weird. And finally, she decided she wanted to go in when like meds were over. Like the nurses were counting and doing all their signatures and all the stuff that they do, you know, once Medline is over. And she kind of wanted to go in. She was asking for the key for the safe. Like it was just all this stuff that was just not within her scope. And it wasn't where she was assigned for the day. And finally, the supervisor and we were just kind of like, well, let her go. Right. Because at that point, we had already kind of talked to custody and said, hey, something's off. We don't really know what it is. And typically that's not something that we would do, right? Like you kind of want to, talk to the staff, kind of explore. But like when it comes to medication and just, having to deal with the FDA and all the other things that are associated with anyone diverting meds or stealing meds, like that's a big deal. And so we kind of let custody know in advance, like, hey, something's going on, and we let her go in. And we have cameras in there, which, dummy, but we were kind of monitoring the cameras. And when she walked out, like custody was there, and so it was a unified effort, but it was also, we can't act like we didn't recognize that something was up, right? And then even then, once like that was like the tip of the iceberg, quite frankly. like after that happened, there was like a ton of stuff that started to just unfold that we didn't know. But this was just the one time that like, a few of us kind of saw her. We thought it was weird. But I think that's the thing, right? Like you never know what you're intervening on, right? When you do speak up, when you do recognize something's off, you may not even know how bad the off is until you actually get involved. And, I'm glad that we did, but it also made me not take for granted. Some people have their routine. They come in, they put the stuff in the locker, they go over here, grab their keys. They do the same thing every day, like you and your Starbucks, right? Like they do the same thing. And so when they're not doing it, you're like, is everything okay?
Right.
Because it's noticeable. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the key. You said noticeable too. I love that word because I was thinking of something else too. So, in my experience with seeing people go and get manipulated and all this other stuff, I look for definitely something where. So sometimes people believe that they have some level of control over the game that's being played. Now, guys, I'm going to say something, a little bit of a stereotype, but by the way, it's not all inclusive. Like obviously people could fall into either category, but for the most part, I'm just going to try to paint a picture. Males that get caught up with, let's say females, there's some illusion of control that the male officer believes they have over that female inmate, believe it or not. For females, and again, nothing's 100%, bear with me, because you could have male officers with male inmates, female officers with female inmates, and just whatever. There's a whole mess of different things here. But just in general, sometimes you can have female officers or female staff member that fall in love with a male inmate. And then there's just that closeness or that bond. So again, one's illusion of control. One is more about feelings of affection and trust. Like I trust you and I love you because it does happen. We've seen it happen. Now, when there's an investigation going on, sometimes what they'll do, because again, they could be concerned that this relationship is a threat to the facility, they may separate the inmates from the staff member being corrupted. And now you start to see observable actions from both staff, just maybe for different motives, to stay connected with that inmate. Now, for the person that was the custody staff member that was more in control or thought they were in control because they had the illusion of control, when that inmate is no longer in their area of responsibility, they start to lose control pretty quick because they're not directly over that inmate anymore.
They can't see him anymore.
They can't see him anymore. So what they're going to start doing is they're going to start trying to find a way to connect to that inmate. It could go into them going into the unit when they're not supposed to, or relaying messages, which happens. Either it's going to be through an inmate or through another staff member. So again, if you have a staff member come up to you saying,
do you hear how bad that's getting though?
Yeah. And
I got to tell another inmate to talk to another inmate.
Right. So it's observable behavior. And the unique thing about this is that they even may tell staff. And that's, again, once you have a staff member saying, hey, yo, can you tell inmates blah, 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 this, it's like, okay, something's funny. Now, for the other side, and again, that's a noticeable behavior, like Connie said. On the other side, if there's a connection or love to that person, that inmate, the staff member's not chasing after them for control. They're chasing after them because they're in love with that person and they don't want that person finding someone else. And it sounds crazy, but it's true. So what's going to happen is the same thing's going to start to happen. Exactly. But here's the funny thing, though. For the one that really has the emotional tie to that inmate, the emotional tie, they're going to look to get a physical presence on that unit next to that inmate because passing a message isn't strong enough. They're going to look to do whatever they can to meet up with that inmate. So whether that's passing messages to facilitate some level of a connection with them, it's going to be something where they have a physical presence, where the control one is just something to make sure I still have some control. It may not be necessarily I have to meet the person, but let me just get something out there just to know I still have some level of control. But guys, this behavior is very observable because the thing I kind of said are noticeable because they don't have direct access to that inmate anymore. So what's going to happen is they're going to be trying to grab that connection through anybody or anything, and you can notice that. And that's something where this Mr. Cool person now is scrambling because they don't have a way to connect to that inmate. And that's why I believe also investigators may do that. You know what? Separate them and see what happens, because that staff member who's already been corrupted and they know it, they got to connect with that inmate. And for the staff member that's in love, this isn't even about the job anymore. That's my boo. That's my man. That's my shorty. You know, I got to see them. I'm in love with them. You know, and the last thing I want is for them to fall in love with anybody else.
And the reality is what, right? Like, so because you can predict that they are going to be making moves in order to connect, you can just sit back and watch how they do it, right? Like, they're teaching you just how far they would go for this inmate to maintain this attachment to the inmate. And I think that is the thing that, you know, folks have to be able to recognize, that this person, maybe they're coming in where they're not supposed to be in, right? Like, I mean, the example you mentioned about going into the unit, they're not supposed to go into that unit, you know, not signing in the logbook when they show up in the unit that they shouldn't be at, right? Like, how come you didn't sign in? What's going on? You know,
yeah,
like,
and this is observable and predictable behavior, because it makes sense to me. If I've been doing stuff I shouldn't be doing, or if I'm in love with that person, I got to have contact with them somehow. And I want to mention something too, guys, because we had a couple 5, but in the dialogue, I did come up with 2, but this will actually relate to what we're talking about, how they justify their behavior. I want to mention something real quick. A lot of people that work in this profession may only be motivated through external incentive, money or whatnot, which, to be honest with you, or I don't want to get arrested, so I don't want to do anything wrong. The problem is when they start to build a trust with that inmate, the inmate can minimize those external consequences. So again, if I'm afraid that I'm going to lose out on my money, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to get arrested, the inmate can say, well, it's only me and you that know it. I'm never going to tell on you. So they have control on the external. I can minimize those concerns if you trust me. That's why I always tell people, watch for that, because the concern is if the staff member starts to trust the inmate at a greater level, then it's like, well, I'm not worried about those external consequences because I know this inmate is not going to turn me in. You know, so again, those consequences get minimized because they put more trust in the inmate. Do I think that's observable? Hell yes. I do. I think that's definitely observable, because you're going to see it in their actions, because even when they speak to you, they may say like this, oh yeah, I know that inmate, but you know what? She's not worth losing my job over, or she's not worth getting arrested over. And then next thing you know, you talk to him a little bit while later. Hey, what's up with that girl in your unit? She was out on the road. What's going on with that? He goes, I don't know. But he goes, I'll tell you something right now. If I wanted to do something with her, now it starts to shift. You know, I know when the supervisor's coming in. I know what areas to do. It's like, hold on, man. You've been thinking a lot about this all of a sudden. You know, because last time we were here, you were talking about, you know, not wanting to get caught up, not wanting to lose your job. But now today you're talking about ways to do it. What time the supervisor comes in. And next thing you know, the person does get caught up, because here, guys, listen to the way the dialogue worked out. First, it was the external incentives, and he's interacting with the inmate. She minimizes that. They gain some level of trust. The next thing is he's coming to work, and she's in his head. He's thinking like, man, if I wanted to, not saying I would, but if I wanted to, Gangi, I came up with 273 ways of how to do it. Now, I wasn't thinking about this, you know, obsessively, but just today, within the last minute, Gangi, I thought of 273. Hold on, bro. Wait, what? You thought, hold on. You spent today thinking of 2. So you know, I mean, that's obsessive, man. And then the next day, guess what? He gets caught up because there wasn't 274 ways, brother. You know what I mean? You took a risk. You went for 274. Yeah, or but you get what I'm saying. I mean, it goes from you're building this trust, so the inmate is able to minimize the external consequence because
Yeah, the
this is, you're
things
not.
that are concern to you.
Yeah, because
Right.
the internal justification is not there. And then next thing you know, the person starts coming up with ways they can do it. And I'm telling you something, if you're walking with an officer, you're working with a staff member who starts to tell you ways that they can circumvent the rules, and we'll get to that in the next one, watch them because they're thinking about it a little bit too much. And it's like, why are you spending your time thinking about it to that level? And Connie, you mentioned this one last time, so you got to go first. This kind of falls into it. Questioning certain policies and procedures, Connie. It's just kind of bled into that. But what's your thoughts on this?
So my thought on this was that, that's usually the person who's making it seem like all the policies and procedures are crap. Like they're here to make, the job worse, make it harder, oh, I don't follow that, or I don't do that, right? It's all like kind of throwing out there, like, you shouldn't pay attention to this either, right? Like, or this shouldn't matter to you either. Like they question those policies and procedures, or they undermine those policies and procedures because somehow or another, those policies and procedures may actually, in fact, impact their ability to do whatever they're doing that's dirty, right? And so if I'm trying to throw folks off my trail, maybe that's what I need to do, right? Because many people are like, what's the policy on that? Is that allowed? Should we be doing that? Is something wrong with what that person is doing? And then you'll have the person come, that policy ain't shit. Like, oh, why are we following that? Oh, we used to do it this way all the time, and things worked out better when we did it the way we used to do it, as opposed to what the current policy is now. And many times the current policies are in place because they are going to prevent someone from doing something that would be inappropriate, because policies, procedures are usually evolving based on events that transpired. And here was the outcome. And here's how we're going to prevent this from happening in the future. And we usually see that kind of baked into some of these policies and procedures. So that person who's kind of who's, I guess, undermining or playing down certain policies and procedures, sometimes it could be that's why.
Yeah, it's when policy and procedures become an obstacle for you to see that inmate. We were discussing before where someone may say, well, it sucks that, you have to call a supervisor every time you want to visit another unit. Like, why? Why does that suck? Because believe it or not, that's a good thing. Because if the inmate makes an allegation, you could clearly say, well, I wasn't in that unit because, again, and the supervisors could back you. But now it's like, me as an officer, if I hear someone say that, it's like, what's so important for you to want to visit a unit? It's not a break area. I mean, I don't get why that's such a big concern. So again, I mean, if you ask the person a question about a policy they don't agree with, I think one of the questions that you should ask, like Connie said, is well, what is that? What obstacle is that creating for you? Try to see what the motive is behind the reason for them questioning that policy and procedure. Like I get why that's, I get you saying it's a concern, but why is it a concern? What is it that you would want to do? Because the funny thing is they may say, I just don't like this policy. And then in my mind, I know what that policy is for. You know what it's for. If I'm a supervisor, you better know what it's for. If you're a frontline person, you better know what it's for. But it's a good question to ask them just on a very elementary level. Like, hey, what is it? What is it that you don't like about the policy? Because in my mind, the policy is restricting you, I'm assuming, from what?
Right.
What is it that it's restricting you from? I actually have two more. One is a quick one. This is an easy one, but the other one I think I added along the way. So we have hearing the staff member sharing personal information. Guys, I've seen it. I've walked by, and I've heard inmates. I heard staff members sharing a little bit too much. I've even had staff members tell me, that they've shared too much with an inmate in regards to maybe their kids,
personal life,
personal information, their favorite sports team to some extent. Again, just in the, I want to say guys, but in the facade of small talk. Look what I just said, facade of small talk, because, I realize something. You're answering more questions than you're actually asking. That's a problem, because it's small talk to you, but not for the inmates, information gathering. I don't know if there's much to really dig into this one. Sharing personal information is always going to be a no-no. And if you hear an officer do that, that's a very observable, correctable behavior, correct?
Absolutely. But you know, when you put that out there, that made me think about what was her name? Toby.
Yep.
Where she talked about sharing information about her husband. And the inmate knew when her husband was working and when he wasn't working. And to me, that was like, oh my God. I mean, she said it very matter of factly when we did that interview with her.
She didn't know it was wrong.
Right. And so, you know, to what extent is any personal information being shared with an inmate, I think is really what we have to be thinking about, right? Like, because she went beyond, you know, I'm a Jets fan, right? Like that was a very, I mean, he knew when she was alone, right? And so when you can't see how the personal information that you're sharing can be used in a manner that one not only jeopardizes the facility, but it jeopardizes you personally at home, right? Like, I think that's something that, you know, yes, I think that was like sort of the maybe a very critical piece of information that she shared.
Well, remember, we challenged that on that show.
Right, we did. And it,
Guys,
you
look for that
know,
episode.
and I don't know, you know, like, I mean, I understand that when we, you know, who are you rooting for the Super Bowl, right? Like, I get where those type of conversations go. But to the extent of when your family is or isn't home and those kind of things, I think it's very big on the sharing of personal information. Yes. Because she's also trusting that he's not going to tell anyone else who may want to get in on the action, right?
She's
like
also giving him leverage,
right.
You know, now I added one more, Connie. I'm just thinking as we have in our discussion. So remember when we talked about proximity and frequency?
Mm-hmm.
So the unique thing about when you're close to somebody is we tend to start believing, I don't know if it's consciously or something, whatever it is, but we start to mimic their behaviors. And in some cases, they can have influence on us. Believe it or not, you know, you got to be careful with that too, because the more you interact with someone, you are open to being influenced. I would love to always remember that's what's important about the prescribed role, because when you're a staff member, you're here, inmates here. Now, once you start to forget your prescribed role, you start to even it out, or worse, start to come here. Now, the problem is once you start getting here or here, influence can shift. You know, influence can shift. Now, check this out. When that happens, change of attitude can occur. So I was thinking about this. So inmates, from what I hear, are not so favorable about being in jail or prison. Not so favorable of the criminal justice system. So all of a sudden you could get somebody that's working for the system and just completely bad-mouthing the system. Now, mind you, bear with me, guys. I always got to do the catch-22. You know, people have many reasons to be upset about the profession, overtime, all this other stuff. I get it. There's a work aspect to it. But we still have to believe in the service that we provide. Yes, I know we may be overworked. I get it. But that doesn't devalue the work that's needed. You know, it's very honorable work, regardless of the fact that, yes, I get we're overwhelmed. I get it. I'm not saying I get that. But the fact is the work that's needed. My thing is when someone starts changing their attitude to the value of the work that we're doing, when I start getting people questioning, why is this inmate even locked up for? Or, you know, oh, we're just locking up everybody nowadays. But I say, hold on with that attitude, because that's not something I want being spread to the inmate population. If that's a belief you have, fine, but don't bring it in here.
Or just imagine that the inmate was able to influence you to believe that.
Well, that's the key. So right. So that's,
I like that you brought it up,
because I think that's important, because I've seen people where they'll come in. I've seen volunteers come in, deal with the inmate, and all of a sudden on the side they're teaching the inmate the wrongs of the criminal justice system, you know, and it's like, hey guys, but they need to know, guys, and maybe, but in a prison setting, be very careful, because you're going to start bringing these inmates together and they're going to do something foolish and they're going to feel justified in doing that. And I don't want that here. Right now, these inmates are locked in or locked up because the criminal justice sent them here. That's what it is. So right now, we got to manage that. The last thing I want is for someone to be an advocate on the adverse of that. You know, because that's going to make us harder for us to manage that. So when you start seeing people defending the inmate's plight, would that be the right word?
Yeah.
Defending the inmate's plight. You know, if I start seeing people that are like, you know, yeah, the criminal justice system is broken. Whoa. And you're here in what capacity right now? Are you here to help the agency serve the inmate? Because right now, I don't see the agency in this. I just see you and the inmate. So yeah, I think if you notice a staff member has a sudden change in the attitude of the value of the work being done, or even if they just have a negative attitude of the value of the work being done, that's an observable behavior, very noticeable. 100% check them. Because that's going to spread fast like a cancer. I've seen it, guys. Connie, I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, it's a value of work.
Absolutely. I mean,
Connie, let me ask you a question. Can you be frustrated, right? Hear me out, because I want to make sure we get this thought out. Can you be frustrated about, let's say, being mandated for your 6th time in the row, correct? Hear me out, but still have value for the work that you do?
Absolutely,
guys.
That voids everything you're working for. It voids everything you're working towards if you no longer see the value in the work that you're doing. So I just can't imagine. I mean, I've had many days of frustration. That didn't mean I no longer believed in the work that I was doing or the importance in the work that I was doing. You know, like, so one of the things that I struggled with, you know, I became a criminal justice professor, right? Like, oh, there's so many things going wrong in the system. How do we fix it? Right? That was the angle that I came from. And so although, you know, through the course of study and training and teaching, all that stuff is great. And I started to learn even more about the way the pendulum swings and all the stuff that was going on in corrections. And being in there made me feel like, wow, but you could make a difference. Like, you are a part of the system that you're reading all these things about. And I mean, even worse, that some of the textbooks don't accurately represent the system, right? So that's a whole other situation. But I think that there's a way that you can use your frustration in a way that's positive to kind of help things be the way you want it to be, right? So it goes beyond, you know, you thinking things need to change, right? It comes to a point where you can be the change. Yes, I'm frustrated, but I'm not going to allow anyone to make me see or feel less that my job is important or that it's significant or the work that I'm doing is significant. And sometimes there may be times where you're feeling like you're not making a difference. I can't make a difference. Things are not going to change. Oh, you might feel that way, right? But like, I think of you and I all the time, right? We're two people. I mean, William Young, you got like a handful of people who are actually trying to make a difference. Yes. You know, and I think that's where it is. And it's not because we didn't ever feel the frustration of the job. It wasn't because, you know, we weren't upset and we weren't pissed. And, you know, so maybe some inmate did come in that I felt like, oh my God, why did they bring her in here? Right? Like every time they did a prostitution run, I had a strong feeling about the prostitution runs. That didn't mean that I'm not going to still do my job.
You have to portray a belief in the job, because if you don't, that will be a sign of vulnerability.
Absolutely. You know, and you have to be okay saying that, right? Like, yeah, I get frustrated. Yeah, I wanted some things to change. Yes, I wanted this to happen and it didn't happen. Okay, great. But then I still survived to fight the fight tomorrow, right? Like, how am I going to make a difference tomorrow?
I love what you're saying, Connie, because I want people to realize something real quick. It's okay. It's okay to voice an opinion. We're not saying that, but the point is, if people start devaluing the work that's being done, I think that's a concern. You know what I mean? I think that's a big concern. I think that, like, you know, if all of a sudden you have no more value for the work that's being done behind the wall, I think that is a bigger concern, because again, you know, that to me is a true separation, because for the people that do their job and they do their job for the right reasons, they're purpose driven and they connect to the work that's being done. However they connect to it, they connect to the work that's being done. If you start losing the value behind that work being done, you're going to be a target for any game that's being played, because you're not purpose driven no more, and your justification is no longer internal. Again, you can ask people, why you do what you do? And people will say, well, I do it for the money. Not good enough.
Right.
Not good enough. And Kai, let me ask you a question, Kai, just out of curiosity. Let me see something. Just want to see something. Can you see me now?
No.
Okay, so this may work. I'm the voice in your head. Okay? No, I'm kidding. I wanted to try that. Yeah, once you started laughing, I knew you didn't believe me. I had so many things I was going to try.
I didn't know what you were going to say, and I was like, that's definitely not my voice.
Okay. Well, next time, try to go along with it. I'll see where it goes.
All right.
Hey, Connie, do you have anything you'd like to say? By the way, I wanted to do that since the beginning of the episode for some reason.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes I don't know what the hell came over me. There was a brief moment in the show where I said, I wonder if I can be Connie's voice in her head. And it was unrelated to any topic. It just happened. And I was like, you know what? And be honest, I was going to let it go out. And as we're getting ready to close, I was like, I got to at least try it. And it wasn't for laughs. I did at this point just to soothe. I had to alleviate that feeling of, I needed to know. Did you believe when you were in the solo layout that when I spoke, did you at any point believe that I was the voice in your head? And once you said no, the feeling has now subsided.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want to go through this whole episode not knowing.
Okay.
Connie, closing thoughts. Oh, I can do it for you, actually. Hold on. Hold on. No, let's be fair. Let me give you a close. I know exactly what your closing thoughts are. Hi, guys. Big fan of Gangi. He's really changed my life. And love you all. And that's it. That's all I got. Just go Gangi.
Wow. Wow. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's moving. Connie, closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts.
It's a good topic.
Yeah, that's a great topic. Corruption happens, right? But I also feel that many of us know enough about the system, about people, about manipulation, about our colleagues to be able to identify that something's up. And even if you can't quite put your finger on what the something is, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, like, is everything okay with you? Right? Because it also allows the person to know that you've seen something different in them, right? Like, it's not that you can pinpoint what the different is, but something's off, right? And in a normal situation, right, usually your colleagues would be like, yo, listen, I'm so stressed, or this is happening, right? But and sometimes, people don't want to talk about it, right? It is still work, and they don't want to bring their personal life into work, and I get that part. But typically, when someone is in a space of need or despair or whatever, and a colleague has actually noticed it, they usually want to tell you something, right? And so when you see all the other stuff that we talked about, just know that, yeah, it's time to either tap your colleague on the shoulder or escalate it, because something's up. And quite frankly, any corrupt staff really puts us all in jeopardy.
And by the way, when she says escalate, she means bring it up. For some reason, some people think escalate means speed forward. It means to bring it up higher for some reason. I don't know why, but I said escalate to somebody one day, and they said, you mean speed it up? No, I said, bring it up. And Connie, I like what you said, because I'm going to say something. I don't think it should be controversial after what you just said in context, but if you notice something and later on, let's say someone gets caught up and it's like, well, I knew something was happening. I put 100% responsibility on you as well. Just as much as the person who did something foolish. If you could 100% agree that, oh, I thought something was happening and you did nothing about it, you have a responsibility there. You do. If you see something wrong in this world, you got to say something, because at the end of the day, you don't know what the outcome of that is or what the outcome of that could be. And the fact that you're more concerned about how you're going to make that person feel over doing what is right, because if that person was cool with you to begin with, that person would understand why you're doing it, because you're protecting the family. But if you're more concerned about what's going to happen to this relationship, the problem is you're already out of your prescribed role. You're already out of your prescribed role. And again, if you can honestly walk away from an incident and say, well, I knew that was going to happen, I'm going to start shifting it on you and say, you know what, I know some people may not agree with that, but I'm sorry, guys, because you were in a position to stop it, and at some point you didn't. That's the key. If you're able to say at the end, I knew that was happening, then why didn't you do anything to stop it? And then whatever excuse, well, I didn't know, the excuse isn't there no more.
Yeah.
I mean, even after watching this video, we gave you things that are observable behaviors that don't even judge the person. It could be just as corrective action, so I'm not here judging you. I'm just, hey, be careful with that. So all because you go to correct somebody doesn't mean that you're judging them as being corrupt. It just means, hey, correct that action. That's a corrective action, blah, blah, blah. And if you're a supervisor, beyond no excuse. because that's why you're trusted in the position, right? You don't have the luxury as a supervisor to even say that, or even think that, because in the end, man, what the hell? You're the supervisor. You're trusted to do corrective action. So if you notice something and you're not acting on it, that to me is the biggest thing, because you're trusted to act, and you're choosing. To be honest with you, Connie, it's comfortability. That's what they're doing, because they don't want conflict. Then don't be a supervisor, or don't work in this profession, because in this profession, you cannot be afraid of conflict.
Nope.
Because that's what's going to stop you from doing the right thing. Your fear of conflict will 100% stop you from doing the right thing, because 9 times out of 10, everything we're dealing with is going to be a conflict. It's just, it's the profession we're in.
The core of our jobs are interacting with people. That is the core of our jobs, whether it's inmates, staff, administration, you name it. That is the expectation. And as we get bigger titles, that expectation only grows.
I agree. And Connie, this show had to be under an hour, and it's over an hour, so Oprah will not air this one.
Jeez.
Yeah.
She can edit some of our laughter.
Yeah, some of the cool, like when I was in your head.
Right.
All right, guys, as always, the show is TWI. Please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.